What if Naruto was overpowered the Gravity Falls with the nine-tailed Garadian? Summary says, Dipper and Mabel had always looked up to their older brother, especially in their times of need. He had always been their pillar of strength. He knew everything about them just as they knew everything about him. Or so they thought. After their parents shipped them off to Gravity Falls to visit their grunkle Stan, they find out that there was more to their brother than they thought. Now let's begin. Deep in a forest, Grunkle Stan. Grunkle Stan, come here, look, I got another one of the gnomes. A little boy yelled to his great uncle as he ran down a small grassy hill, capturing the small bearded creature. The child wore a red shirt, with a black hoodie. He had a red and white cap on his head, an orange pine tree at the front, and small dark blue canvas sneakers. He turned to his Grunkle, who had another one of the creatures sitting on his shoulders, holding a timer, and was walking calmly to his location. A smile appeared on Stan's face. You managed to find and catch another one. I don't know how you can keep up with those little suckers, though considering that you have 3 times more energy than 20 kids on a sugar high combined, I guess I shouldn't be surprised. He said, looking down at his great nephew, who was looking up at him with a toothy grin along with the gnome in his arms. The gnome on Stanford's shoulder spoke. 3 minutes and 2 seconds, that's a new record, kid. Jeff had a smirk on his face as he congratulated the young boy. More gnomes were emerging out of the forest and into the clearing. Nice hide today, Shmeebalock. Shmeebalock. Stan looked at the sky. Seems you guys have had enough fun, just in time too. It's time to go home, kiddo. The child pouted. Already? Can't we stay just a bit? What the boy was about to say was cut short as the sound of loud howls filled the area and massive wolves jumped into the clearing the 4 were in. Stan cursed under his breath. Kid, get out of here. Run, Stan ordered as he equipped golden knuckles and punched one of the wolves. But, no buts except yours getting out of here. Go, now. The young boy hesitated before sprinting into a random direction into the forest, intending to get as far away from the fight as possible. The child ducked under branches and jumped over logs and fallen branches before sliding down a slope, but had hit a stray tree root and lurched forward. He screwed his eyes shut as he rolled the rest of the way down. The feeling of something scratching the side of his cheek made his eyes open in shock, only for them to widen even more when he saw how steep the hill he was rolling down was. He briefly saw yellow blurs to his right as he hurriedly closed his eyes again, but brushed it off as his hair. The 5-year-old felt as if he had been rolling down for hours, when he finally skidded to a stop. After a few minutes, the child opened his blue eyes and slowly stood up, his clothes dirty and slightly ripped in a few places. He also had some leaves and grass in his hair, as well as a few cuts and small bruises due to sticks and sharp rocks. The child was awed at the sight he had found and slowly walked forward. In front of him was an old temple made of stone bricks, cracked and mossy with age. It looked similar to a small castle and had 2 giant fox statues with red eyes that seemed to glow with power as he got closer. The young boy suddenly stopped, his pupils dilated when he heard a strange voice in his mind. I've been waiting for you, Kit. Unknown location. A figure sat straight up in his bed, sweating and heart beating rapidly. He looked at the digital clock on the table beside his bed. It read 6:39 a.m. Another one of those, eh? He sighed as his heart slowed to a more normal rate. His voice woke the furry creature sleeping at the end of his bed. Those have been occurring for a while now, haven't they? Yeah, they have. The question is, after all these years, why now? The male wondered. The animal looked at the clock. Whatever the reason is, you better get back to sleep. You still have a week of school before summer vacation, not to mention that you'll have work, he said, before laying his head back down on the bed. The teen sat quietly for a minute before breathing in deeply. Yeah, you're right, though I do wonder if they told them about the trip yet. The young man sighed and went back to sleep. Piedmont, California. It was a Friday afternoon. Schools rang their bells, signaling that the day was over for the students. The ringing bells also meant another thing. It also meant that, much to the students' joy and the adults' ire, it was the start of summer vacation. To most of the children, summer vacation would be spent playing video games, watching TV and sleeping. To a certain pair of Pines twins, though they didn't know it, it was the start of a great adventure. In the Pines household, a certain male twin groaned. The boy had messy, brown hair that covered most of his forehead and had two distinct hair flaps on the back of his head, a trait shared by those of the Pines family. He was wearing a red shirt with a dark blue vest on top and light gray shorts along with white socks that each had a single red stripe and black shoes which had white on the bottom. He had a game console in his right hand while slouching into his family's couch, a girl sitting next to him busy playing with their feline pet. He looked at his parents who were on the other side of them, his father sitting on an armchair with his mother standing beside him. "What? Why do we have to go to? Where do we have to go again?" "Gravity Falls, Oregon," his mother replied. "Yeah, there. Why weren't Mabel and I told of this sooner? We had a lot of things planned." "Because," his father interjected, "you two's plans consist of only three things. Eating, playing games and sleeping. Dipper, your mother and I thought that it would be good for you and your sister to spend your summer vacation out of the house for once, plus you haven't seen your grunkle Stan since he got you guys to help him make counterfeit money." The young 13-year-old boy, the now identified as Dipper, sighed. "I guess it can't help. Besides, you guys have already bought the tickets for the bus we're going in to get there, haven't you?" he asked knowingly. His parents just had sheepish smiles on their faces and were rubbing the back of their heads. Dipper sighed again. He knew his parents enough to know that their actions meant his assumption was right. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow." Dipper blinked. "So soon?" His mother, as if she read his mind, said, "You have to leave this early because it takes quite a while to get to Gravity Falls. We also arranged this so that you can spend as much time as you can there." After sighing again, her son turned to his twin who was happily cuddling their cat. "What about you, Mabel? You haven't said anything about this situation." The girl in question turned to her twin, not stopping her cuddling of the struggling feline. Mabel had brown hair like her brother, except hers was long and reached her hips. Her hair curled at the ends and she also had the distinctive Pines hair flaps. She had braces on her teeth and was wearing an undershirt and a pink sweater which had a picture of a shooting star with rainbow trails knitted at the front. She was also wearing a purple skirt and black shoes with white socks. "Though I want to stay here for summer, I also want to go somewhere outside of the house for a change. Besides, like Dad said, we haven't seen Grunkle Stan in a while. Plus, didn't you say earlier that we didn't really have much of a choice in the matter anyway, Mr. Size a lot?" she replied. Dipper opened his mouth to retort, but the sound of a car arriving then parking made him pause. Even Mabel stopped choking their cat which had a somewhat relieved look on its face. There were only 3 people in their family of 5 that could drive, and 2 of those were their mother and father, both of which were right in front of them, which meant that it had to be him. They glanced at the clock and saw that the time was 6:08 p.m., had they have been talking to their parents for that long. Shaking their thoughts out of their heads, the 2 dropped the things they were holding and ran to the window beside the door leading into their home as their parents smiled at their actions. Outside, parked on the driveway was a rust-orange Ranger. "It's about time. His jobs must have taken longer than he thought they would today," the twins thought, as the sound of keys opening the locks in their door reached their ears. A figure walked into the house and saw his parents with half-knowing and half-amused smirks on their faces on the other side of the room, which meant the person flinched and readied himself for a powerful force to strike him. Luckily, he managed to stand his ground when he felt the weight of the 2 13-year-olds, who promptly catapulted themselves at him when he reached their peripheral vision, collide against his body. "Oof," was the only sound that came out of his mouth as Dipper and Mabel both gave him bone-crushing hugs. He in return gave them both a massive, playful bear hug at the same time. The twins giggling as he lifted them up, their feet no longer touching the carpet on their floor. Once the figure put them both back down, they looked up at him with large smiles on their faces and saw their 18-year-old older brother giving them both a big goofy grin in return. This was N. Pines. His full name being Naruto, N. Maelstrom Pines. His hair was brown with bright yellow tips and had 3 whisker-like scars on his cheeks. Unlike his siblings, his hair was spiky instead of curly and was held in a low ponytail, but he still inherited the signature Pines hair flaps, though they weren't very visible as they were hidden under the spikes. His clothing consisted of a blue shirt, an orange short-sleeved hoodie with black trim, dark blue cargo pants, black and red shoes and had a black headband tied around his head, which he wore slanted so that it hid his eye and the area around it from view. He was also wearing a black watch around his left wrist and had a necklace made of green gems tied around his neck along with a mask that covered the bottom half of his face. The 4 others in the Pines household found his insistence on wearing the face mask slightly odd, but not as much as his necklace. Mostly because of its appearance. It looked like it said, WN, with the letter N, only having its left side, as if whatever the necklace was snapped in half. What was odder was when they had asked him about it, he would get a far-away look on his face and turn to a certain direction, always looking towards the same direction whenever they asked, and seemed to be reminiscing about something while unconsciously rubbing his right arm, which had a black 9-tailed fox tattoo that covered the whole arm. How are my 2 favorite little munchkins? It's the start of summer vacation today. Have they told you about staying with Grunkle Stan? N asked, his grin still plastered on his face. Yep, we're a bit peeved though. I mean, we were expecting to just have a summer filled with pranks, joyrides with you, video games and watching TV. But now we have to go to Gravity Falls and visit Grunkle Stan. It's just a bit sudden, you know. Also, where's Kay? He's always with you, plus he's so fluffy. Even if he doesn't agree to being called that. Mabel replied with enthusiasm, happy that her older brother and his partner was home. N, after hearing that they were a little angry about going to their Grunkle's home, gave his pouting parents an "I told you so" smirk. His parents walked over to him and gave him $10 each. I told you telling them last minute would be a bad idea. Plus, after all these years, I thought you guys would have known by now to not bet against me. Naruto chuckled. His parents just kept pouting. And then turned back to his younger siblings. Kay is being a lazy bum and is napping at the back of the car. I'm guessing you guys have to pack right after dinner, eh? I'll help you guys with that. Just make sure you bring everything you need or want to bring, all right? The 2 nodded in response. Time 9:30 p.m., twins' room. So after he paid me for mowing his lawn, me and Kay left to go to help unload some boxes at that warehouse that set up flyers for volunteers. When we arrived, I heard someone yell. We ran and the first thing we saw was the manager, who for some reason was wearing a bunny suit stuck under a pile of boxes with a dog growling and pulling at the suit's right foot. N said while chuckling along with Kay, retelling the occurrences that had happened earlier in the day, with the twins laughing as they folded clothes and placed them in their suitcases. What about that martial arts school? Are they still trying to get you to be a student? Even though you're actually better than most of the senseis? Mabel asked. Naruto sighed. Yes, unfortunately they still are. Dipper growled slightly at that. Dang, if only you let us, me and Mabel would be able to beat the crud out of those guys. You did teach us how to protect ourselves after all. Naruto raised an eyebrow as his 2 younger siblings threw a few shadow punches into the air before he got a mischievous smirk on his face. You 2 think you can beat them up? How can you handle them, if you can't even handle? This. N yelled at the end as he pounced on his 2 younger siblings, tickling them without mercy as their 9-tailed fox friend just shook his head at their antics. The 2 couldn't do anything but laugh with tears running out of their eyes. They couldn't make him stop as he was both bigger and stronger than the 2 of them combined, but that fact didn't stop them from trying to push their brother away. After a few minutes of laughter, the twins couldn't take it anymore. They banged their hands on the floor signaling their surrender. The room was silent as the twins regained their breathing and as their brother grinned at them with Kurama, the blood-red multi-tailed fox that was twice their height, who was lying beside their brother. Naruto and Kurama stood up as they looked at the clock. Okay, we're going to sleep. You guys should get some rest as well. You've got quite an adventure ahead of you guys. The 18-year-old said to his younger siblings while glancing at the filled suitcases. Dipper could have sworn that the tone his brother used in the final sentence was hinting something. He turned to the 2 younger Pines and saw that they were looking down, their faces looking a bit sad. Oi, what's with the long faces? Mabel looked up and replied, well, this is our first time going somewhere without you, Mom or Dad around. We're used to spending school breaks with you as well. So this summer vacation is going to be really weird for us without you guys around. N sighed and had a small smile on his face. He kneeled down, making the twins look up. He looked at them and made a deal. All right, tell you what. I have some business with a couple of my jobs to finish, so I'll be a bit busy for a little while. But once I'm done with them, I promise I'll drive to Grunkle Stands with K so that we can stay with you guys at Gravity Falls for the summer as well. How does that sound? The twins perked up and their sad expressions disappeared and was replaced with large smiles. That sounds awesome, they replied in unison. N stood up again, to leave for his room. Great, now that that's over with, get some sleep. It's late. He ruffled their heads and left the room with K in tow. Next morning, Dipper and Mabel stood outside the entrance of a bus with their bags, facing their parents, brother and Fox. Be careful, all right you two? Their mother asked. We will, promise, Dipper replied. Don't do anything that me and Kurama would do whilst we're not there, all right? We're not as insane as you two, big bro. Mabel grinned. Their mother raised an eyebrow before turning to her only daughter. Mabel, your older brother told us that he and Kay are going to be joining you guys in Gravity Falls a little later. Make sure that those two and Dipper don't do anything stupid. Then again, these are your brothers we're talking about. Mrs. Pines smirked along with Mabel. Oi, we aren't that bad, are we? The response from the two boys and a growl from Kay just made the two females' smirks grow. After saying their goodbyes once more and giving the four family members each a hug, the twins boarded the bus and left for Gravity Falls. That night, Naruto sat with Kurama on his bed in the room he had for 6 years. He looked at his bedside table and pressed a hidden button located on the bottom of the very first shelf. A wall silently opened up, showing a collection of items from strange diamond-shaped knives to a suit of combat armor placed on an armor stand. But out of all the items there, the one that had his attention was black, worn-out book. It had an image of a 6-fingered hand on the cover, and scrawled on the inside of the hand were the letters, Tenevgul Sniefnaq Xlaw. He picked it up and had a forlorn smile on his face as the two stared at the book in his hands. Gravity Falls, huh, of all the places, he chuckled and looked out of his window, towards the same direction he always looked to whenever his family asked about his necklace. I wonder, how much has that place changed? Forest Road. An engine revved and there was nothing but silence inside the truck. The only thing that could be heard as it drove through the woods was the friction its wheels had with the rocky dirt road. The vehicle's driver sighed, his eyes briefly looking at the bags placed on the seat beside him before turning back to the road. He took his left hand off of the wheel to glance at the time on his watch. It read 6:45. The brunette sighed again and ran his raised hand through his spiky hair. His cobalt irises drifted to the side mirror to his right, staring at the reflection of his multi-tailed companion as the fox let the wind blow against his face. How you doing back there, Kurama? He asked, smirking under his mask at the canine's joyful expression. Hey, doin' just fine, Kit. Now, keep your eyes on the road and speed it up a little, would ya? I want the air to rush past me faster. The 18-year-old chuckled and pushed his foot harder against the gas pedal, his eyes trailing the speed meter as it went from 75 per mile per hour to 100 per mile per hour. Geez, good thing we're still in the forest where the speed limit is 100. If he asked me to do this while in Gravity Falls, I probably would have been caught by blubs for speeding. Naruto chuckled inwardly as he shook his head in amusement. I wonder how everyone's doing, it's been 10 years since I last went there. A few minutes later, he saw a sight that he hadn't seen in ages at the corner of his eyes. It was the "Welcome to Gravity Falls" sign. He grinned and twisted his head to face forward. His grin grew when he felt his truck's wheels jump up slightly as it switched from running on dirt to concrete. He slowed his speed as he entered the town, looking around and smiling at the familiar faces he saw. Through a window of Greasy's diner, he saw lazy Susan stop her cleaning of the tables in favor of freezing in shock at the sight of his familiar head of spiky hair along with the enormous fox sitting on its haunches. The two gave her similar, well-known mischievous grins as they drove past. When they disappeared around the corner, Susan chuckled, shaking her head clear of surprise and went back to tending to her customers, a fond smile now on her face. Haha, nice to know we haven't been forgotten. Then again, considering the amount of pranks we played on everyone here, it would have been more of a surprise if they did. Hey, Kurama, Naruto said, the fox chuckling in response. He took a deep breath, letting the forest air fill his nostrils. Ah, it is good to be back. I know how you feel, Kit. I do so love the air in this place, it is much cleaner than the air we have to breathe back in Piedmont. Kurama replied mentally. Just as Naruto was about to drive into the other side of the forest, where his great-uncle's home was located at, he spotted Manly Dan conversing with Sheriff Blubbs, who had Stan's old handyman dressed in a police uniform standing beside him. The three felt his eyes on them and turned towards him, their eyes widening and their faces making looks of awe at the young man who used to be the little boy they interacted with years ago. Naruto saw their faces and gave them a cheeky wink along with a nod of recognition. The eldest Pine child stared ahead, his truck steadily growing closer to the worn building dubbed the Mystery Shack. His method of transportation making a quiet skidding sound as he parked beside a stylized golf cart behind the tourist trap. He slung one of the straps on his backpack over his left shoulder and grabbed the duffel bag before silently sliding off of his seat. He closed the door as silently as he could and nodded at Kurama, who had jumped down to his side. He raised an eyebrow when he spotted the large bag of bacon-flavored dog treats in his maw. TCH, of course. Out of all the things I told you that you could bring, that was the only thing you needed. Naruto said mentally, rolling his eyes. Be lucky that I am currently holding something right now, or I would have already bitten your arm off for your disregard at my source of sustenance. The sun is nearly down, we should head inside. The brown-haired male gave a grunt of agreement. They went over to the gift shop entrance and made their way to the door. Naruto heard Kurama chuckle and he looked back at him as he placed a hand on the door. Seeing the fox just smirk in mirth, he raised an eyebrow at him, not noticing the person on the other side of the door who was about to exit the establishment. See ya, guys. Tell Mr. Pines that I'm going home now. A red-headed teen called out behind her, a hand on the doorknob. She twisted the object and pulled the door towards her harshly, unknowingly pulling Naruto towards her direction as well. She was about to step out, when she crashed into something, the force of the collision knocking her into the ground. The flannel-wearing girl propped herself up with an elbow while grabbing her pounding head using her free hand. What the? Oof. A grunt escaped Naruto's mouth as he was pushed backwards slightly by the clash. He looked downwards and saw the female who he had accidentally knocked down and knelt down to help her up. Oops. Sorry about that, I wasn't looking at where I was going. How about I lend you a hand? His words trailed off and his eyes widened as he took in the young woman's familiar features. She had long brownish-red hair that trailed just past her hips, a black lumberjack hat worn over it. She wore a green flannel top along with dark blue jeans and muddy boots. Freckles dotted her cheeks and her emerald eyes were filled with confusion as she looked at the stranger in front of her. Naruto noticed her stare and shook his head out of his slight daze. Sorry about that, I kinda spaced out for a moment there. He chuckled out nervously, scratching the back of his neck with his left hand. He gave her an eye smile and offered her his right hand. Here. The young woman raised an eyebrow and grasped his hand with her own, letting him pull her up to her feet. She noted that she had never seen him before, her other eyebrow arching when she took a closer look at the odd man's appearance. The male, who seemed to be the same age as her, had spiky brown hair with yellow, frosted tips. He was wearing a plain black shirt, dark blue cargo pants and red sneakers. He had a fox tattoo covering his entire right arm and had a black backpack on his shoulder as well as a duffel bag by his feet. While this usually didn't count as mysterious or different, it was his facial features she saw that confused her the most, or rather the lack thereof. The bottom half of his face was completely concealed by a black face mask and there was a black headband wrapped around his forehead. The long piece of cloth seemed to have been slanted slightly to hide his right eye, but with it already being obscured by his hair, it just gave her the impression that he had something to hide. Hey, again, I'm really sorry. I was a bit too distracted when I was seeing if my buddy over here was all right. He pointed behind him and she peered past his side to see what he was gesturing to. She adopted a face full of surprise at seeing the large, scarlet-red fox that was sat innocently behind him, a bag of meat in its jaw. Out of all the things she expected to see, this was definitely not on the list. Yeah, I know, he's a big guy. But once you get to know him, you'll see that he actually acts like a little kid most of the time. Naruto yelped when Kurama whacked him in the back of the head using his packet of food and playfully glared at the clearly amused fox. The redhead laughed as she witnessed the interaction between the two, causing them to grin, though she only saw an eye smile from the brunette. Haha, found that funny, eh? The name's N Pines, he said, holding out his hand for a shake. At seeing her wide-eyed reaction to his introduction, he blinked in confusion. Is something wrong? Oh, nothing. My name is Wendy Corduroy, she stuttered out, his question breaking her out of her stupor. She gave him a smile and shook his hand, not noticing the duo's eyes narrowing at her name. So, I'm guessing that you're Mabel and Dipper's older brother. Ah, you know those two. Naruto chuckled, dropping his hand to his side. Wendy gave him a grin and put her hands in her pockets. Yeah, pretty hard not to know who they are when they're your boss's grandniece and grandnephew. Me and my coworker Seuss were usually appointed to be their babysitters since they don't really know the surroundings that much, and the twins couldn't stop talking about you. Heck, I had suspicions as to who you were when I saw that you fit the detailed description that those two gave us multiple times. The trio chuckled. Wendy gave Naruto a mischievous smirk as she spoke. They also said that you promised to be here in a day or two, but how long has it been? A week. Tisk, tisk, do you know how much trouble you caused me, Seuss and Mr. Pines? They kept asking us whether you were here or not, always coming in and out of their room every couple of minutes or so, never giving us a break. She shook her head amusedly when she saw the sheepish expression on his face. The female teen then slid past the duo and waved a hand behind her as she walked away. Well anyway, you two better go in there before they make Mr. Pines become crazier than he already is, especially now that they're starting to go on about monsters and stuff. See ya. Naruto and Kurama narrowed their eyes on her form as she disappeared into the woods. The fox dropped the bag in his mouth and turned to the human beside him. HMPH, didn't expect her of all people to be here, then again, considering who your great uncle is, we should have. The only thing I'm wondering is what could have gotten into his head that gave him the idea to hire her. If my suspicions are correct, due to her laid-back posture, he's either bald or nearly bald at having to deal with her seemingly lack of motivation. Unless he has gained a lot of patience these past couple of years. Naruto hummed as thoughts went through his mind. Yes, but you could see that her laziness is merely a facade. I can see the tiredness in her eyes, she's stressed. Though you do prove a point on the subject of her having a job here. Stan knows why she should be kept away from the shack, from anything to do with me. Seeing the saddened look in Naruto's eye, the multi-tailed fox sighed and picked up his food with a tail, nudging the human into the building. Enough of that, let's go now. Wendy was right about Stan going nuts if left alone with the twins for too long. We also have to investigate at what she meant by them going on about monsters in Gravity Falls. Once Naruto's distracted mind registered the last sentence, the sadness was replaced with seriousness and his visible, warm azure iris turned into icy blue. True, we need to speak to Grunkle Stan about this immediately, they're not meant for this sort of business. They walked past the register, slowly making their way through the room while their eyes examined the old exhibits that reminded the duo of bittersweet memories. Naruto's eyes lidded themselves halfway. A fond smile was underneath his mask when he ran a hand over the scuba helmet near the cashier area. I remember this. Kurama walked over to the back of the counter and poked his head into one of the compartments, pulling it back with an old dog bowl now clamped in his mouth. He dropped it and grew a grin. He still kept this thing around. Naruto lifted the helmet up slightly and reached his hand inside, taking out the red, white and orange cap he used to wear when he was a kid. It was a custom-made, pine tree baseball cap that Stan had given him on his second trip to Gravity Falls. It wasn't much, the thing was basically one of the caps that the Mystery Shack sold at the gift shop but had been altered so that the blue was red while the tree was orange. The item held quite a lot of good memories for the 18-year-old. The two flinched out of their thoughts when the sound of a door banging echoed loudly in the currently near-empty room. Their heads snapped towards the direction where it emanated from and their eyes widened when they saw a familiar-looking, tall, chubby man who wore a Mystery Shack staff t-shirt. A brown cap was on his head and he had a couple of short hairs poking out from his chin. The employee had a similar reaction to theirs. His eyes were nearly out of their sockets, his jaw hanging open. The toolbox that had been in his hand was forgotten and the instruments inside clattered onto the floor as the container slipped from his fingers. No way, is that you, N? The man stuttered out, a face-splitting smile growing on his face when the spiky-haired male before him nodded. He rushed at the young man and lifted him in a bone-crushing bear hug. Ha ha, I haven't seen you dudes in ages. Naruto gave him a gentle eye smile, not fazed at all in the slightest. He patted the other man on the head to get his attention. Yes, it is nice to see you too, Seuss. Though, do you mind putting me down? Seuss blinked at his request before placing him back on the ground with a sheepish look. Sorry man, I guess I got too excited. It is of no consequence. You were merely greeting a friend that you had not seen in quite some time. Kurama said, Naruto nodding in agreement. Seuss's smile grew even wider at hearing the fox's voice. He walked up to the multi-tailed quadruped and scratched him behind the ears. You don't know how awesome it is to hear you speak again, buddy. The handyman then snapped his fingers as a thought came to his head. Oh, that's right, Dipper and Mabel told me that you guys are gonna be here for summer. Come on, I'll take you to them. Naruto picked up his duffel bag from the floor and followed the enthusiastic man with Kurama in tow. As they got closer to the living room, the sounds of the twins' voices became louder. A grin worked its way onto the eldest Pine's child's face when he heard his younger siblings conversing and used his enhanced sense of hearing to listen in. Stan still doesn't believe me. I keep trying to tell him how dangerous this whole place is, but he always says that it's all a bunch of baloney. Dipper grumbled, roughly pushing the buttons on what seemed to be a gaming controller in his annoyance. Well, you can't expect someone who's lived in this area his entire life to believe you instantly. I mean, come on. If it weren't for that entire fiasco with the gnomes, I'm pretty sure I'd also be saying that you're crazy. Mabel said, making Kurama and Naruto widen their eyes slightly. Naruto felt a hand on his shoulder, and looked to see that it was Seuss. The big-boned man used his head to gesture to the children, to which Naruto responded with a vertical finger in front of his lips, telling him to keep quiet. The handyman nodded in understanding, patting the brunette's back before he went back to pick up his tools and continue his job. Seeing that he had gone, Naruto turned his attention back to his little brother and sister. Fine, whatever. Dipper sighed out before looking at his twin from the corner of his eyes suspiciously. Now, what's this I hear about you going on a date? Need I remind you what happened the last time you went out on one? The still-hidden brother and fox narrowed their eyes as they began to emit murderous auras. Naruto clenched his fist in irritation while Kurama growled lowly. The thought of some guy taking their baby sister somewhere and possibly breaking her heart angered them to no end. Mabel, however, was oblivious to the two's displeasure about the subject and merely rolled her eyes. Ah, come on Dipper. It ain't a real date, I just agreed to it so that I didn't hurt the little guy's feelings. Mabel, you know things don't work that way. He loves you. Dipper gave his sister a deadpan stare, growling out the last part of his sentence slightly. Although he was younger than her, that didn't mean he didn't feel the same way as his older brother in the female sibling dating a guy department. Reet. Calm down Dip, get that protective side under control. Geez, now I'm kinda happy that Big Bro and Kay ain't here yet. You're hard enough to handle as it is, but you three combined is a recipe for disaster for me. Besides, I'm not that lovable. Mabel rolled her eyes again before focusing on the video game at hand. She pushed a couple of buttons on her controller and managed to defeat Dipper. Ah yeah. The boy grumbled at his loss, placing the controller on the ground. At least we agree on something. The hiding duo took this as their cue and walked towards the TV, standing behind the twins. Naruto chuckled, catching their attention. Now, Dipper. That isn't a nice thing to say to our sister, now is it? Dipper and Mabel gasped in shock. They spun around, looking up at their eye-smiling brother and the smirking fox beside him. The twins hopped up to their feet and tackled the new arrivals into the ground. Eep, when did you guys get here? Mabel squealed eagerly, one arm hugging Naruto's stomach while her other was wrapped around Kurama's neck, nearly preventing the fox from breathing. Oof, Mabel, you think you could loosen the hug up a bit? I think you're blocking Kay's windpipes. Mabel blinked at her brother's request, turning her head to look at their family pet. Oops, sorry Kay, she yelped when she saw that his face had taken a slightly bluish hue due to the lack of oxygen. Kurama merely gave a grunt, standing up after rolling over to his front and shook himself. Naruto smiled at the scene of his sister scratching the purring fox behind the ears as an apology before facing his brother who seemed to be in deep thought. "So, I see Mabel's taking things all right. How've you been doing, little bro?" he asked. "Huh?" Dipper blinked confusedly. He had been thinking about the mysterious journal he had found in the woods and the content he had read in it. After a few seconds, his brain finally finished processing what his sibling had just said. "Oh, sorry, I've been good. The sudden change in environment kinda bothered us for a bit, but we got over it quickly." Naruto raised his visible eyebrow at the slightly odd behavior before shaking it off when he noticed that the young teen's hat was different than he last remembered. "I see that you've changed a part of your wardrobe there. What happened to your brown star cap?" Dipper flinched at the question, the action causing Naruto to narrow his eyes suspiciously, answering hastily. Well, you see, I lost it while I was out, doing chores." "Yeah, Grunkle Stan sent me out to do something for him in the woods and an animal took it off of my head. He gave me this one to replace it." The boy chuckled nervously under his masked brother's gaze. The older brunette sighed and gave the anxious boy an eye smile, rubbing his head gently. "All right then, if you say so." Mabel was about to speak up, when she was interrupted by the doorbell ringing. Kurama walked over to the door and opened it with a tail, only for the wall to its left to explode into pieces as a white-haired child on a brown horse burst into the home. "Oi, who are you? Don't you know that crashing into someone else's home like that is a bit rude?" Naruto asked. His visible eyebrow arched and his arms were crossed while Kurama walked over to his side, the kitsune's stance tense as he growled at the boy. Mabel hurriedly stepped in front of her brother and his partner, her arms waving manically at her side. Whoa, time out you two, he's a friend," she said in a calming manner. They looked down at the 13-year-old before lifting their heads to stare at the young male again and began to scrutinize him. He seemed to be no older than 11 years of age and was quite chubby. He wore a baby blue suit with an American flag pin attached to his collar. He wore a black undershirt and his hair was either the same size as or just a bit bigger than his own head, but judging from the scents that they could smell and the shininess of the hair on his head, they could confidently say that the kid used a lot of hairspray. A lot of hairspray. Mabel then stepped to the side, turned slightly so that she could see both her newly arrived family members and the one who she presumed had come here to take her out on their date. "Gideon, this is my big bro, N. Pines. The fox beside him is K, he's like, our family's animal friend. N.K, this is Gideon Gleeful. He's a friend that I met a few days ago. Howdy, it's nice to meet more family members of Mabel's." Gideon smiled, holding his hand out for a shake. Naruto stood his ground and only narrowed his eyes, giving him a swift nod in acknowledgement while Kurama gave him a short, but very vicious, snarl. The boy chuckled nervously at that and slowly drew his hand back. Dipper watched the scene with an amused smirk as Mabel facepalmed. Naruto kept his stony expression and ignored the sharp glare his sister sent him. "You see it too, right?" he asked the canine through a mental link. "Yes, that teal gem he wears is not just any other common item. He wields a powerful weapon that has only been documented in one specific book, or should I say journal. Not only that, I can sense the darkness within him, albeit small. Regardless, we must keep on our toes when around him. We both know that, if not dealt with properly, something small can very easily make itself into something big. This case is especially dangerous with the power he currently holds around his neck and the tome of knowledge he no doubt holds." The fox mumbled, his eyes not leaving the boy's form. "HN." Naruto grunted in response before cutting the link off. "You." Mabel groaned before turning to the nervous Gideon. "Sorry about that. They don't really trust the friends of newly made all that easily." "Well, he trusts the friends I make who are girls, but guys, not so much." The famous child merely gave a small, uneasy laugh. "It's all good. Now how about we head on out to our date?" Mabel flinched and Dipper had to cover his mouth with both his hands in order to not guffaw out loud at the mistake Gideon had just made. The masked teen and the fox immediately snapped their heads to Mabel, both with an incredulous look on their faces. Mabel winced when she saw that their expressions gave her one silent command. "Explain." She crossed her arms and pouted at the floor. "Yeah, He is. Now, don't give me those looks you two. Take it easy, will ya? You, K, Dipper and Dad always get like this. I mean, come on. It's just one date. Can you let me go, just this once? Naruto stared at her for a few silent minutes, his mind going back to what she had said to Dipper earlier in regards to this date before sighing. He rubbed his temples to soothe the small migraine he now had. He turned to Gideon and gave him a sharp look. Bring her back at 8:30. You comply with this one rule, and we won't have any qualms. If you don't, me and Kay will personally make you see hell, kid or not. We don't make exceptions for things as serious as this. Thank you. Mabel grinned up at her brother, giving him and Kurama a hug. She quickly clambered up the horse and tapped the boy on his shoulder. Let's go, Gideon. Okay. He tugged on the mount's reins, making it back out of the hole he had created in his entrance. Pulling on the rope, he made it face towards their destination before turning back to look at Naruto. I hope you have a good night, sir. Kid, since our father ain't here, I'm gonna have to fill in his spot as well as do my job as her older brother. I'm barely keeping myself from punching you off of that horse and drop-kicking you back to town. Don't test my patience. Gideon gave a nervous chuckle at this and urged his steed to get away from the Pines' residence as fast as possible. But before he could get out of the clearing, he heard Naruto's voice call out to him one more time. If she is late by only 1 millisecond, you can count on my word when I say that I will be after your soul. If that don't scare you, then here's one more thing. Other than me, there are 3 others in this home related to her, and I am sure that they will no doubt enjoy aiding me in ripping you a new one. Naruto and Kurama huffed in annoyance as they stared at where in the forest the horse had gone through, only for their ears to twitch when the sound of Dipper's laughter reached them. They turned to his direction and smirked when they saw him on the ground, clutching his stomach as the sounds of amusement left his mouth. After a few minutes, the young teen managed to get himself under control and slowly stood up. Ah, man, that was very amusing. Dipper chuckled out, wiping a tear from his eye. The way you made him squirm was hilarious, and did you see that look on his face? You gotta teach me how to do that. Soon, kiddo. For now, just ignore the hole. I'll fix it tomorrow. Will do. Since Mabel is gone, now I don't have another player for the video game. You wanna play, N? The short boy asked his brother, looking up at him hopefully. Ah, maybe later lil bro. Since I just got here, I have a lot of stuff to deal with first. He smiled apologetically, but seeing the saddened look on his brother's face, he sighed and knelt down, placing a hand on the boy's head. Okay, tell you what, I'll deal with that stuff tomorrow. But the talk that I need to have with our great uncle can't be held off. After our chat, I'll spend the night with you, yeah. Dipper perked up at this and smiled broadly. That sounds awesome. Oh, and since you're wanting to talk to Stan, I think he's still in his room. He always warns us to keep away from that place though, so I wouldn't be surprised if he just slams the door closed in your face if I were you. Naruto chuckled. Ah, don't worry about that, buddy. Just wait here, this probably won't take all that long. Seeing him nod, the spiky-haired teen and the multi-tailed fox walked towards the room. The sight of a few of the photos on the walls making them smirk. Soon enough, they were stood in front of the door that led to Stan's bedroom. Naruto took a deep breath and raised his hand to knock on the door, the sound of his knuckles hitting wood echoing. Yeah, I'm coming. The two heard a loud yawn and the sounds of heavy footsteps making their way towards the door before the clicks of deadbolt locks being unlocked replaced them. What is it? Stanley Pines stopped mid-sentence at the sight of his eldest great-nephew, his jaw hanging in place. Kurama smirked while Naruto gave him an eye smile. Hello to you too, uncle. But I am afraid that greetings will have to wait, he said, his unobscured azure eye sending the older male a steely gaze. It has come to our attention that 3 children have somehow managed to acquire certain pieces of knowledge that is supposed to be forbidden to them. Yes, we need to talk. Ah, dang it, Stan sighed, stepping over to the side. All right, come on in. Naruto and Kurama walked into the room, the older Pines male closing the door with a slam before bolting it shut once again. The masked teen dropped his bags on the floor before beginning to pace back and forth in the middle of the room, Kurama sitting on his haunches as he watched him. He let out a frustrated breath and spun around to face his great uncle. The fox saw the anger bubbling in his partner and silently touched a nail beside the door with a claw, a few hidden inscriptions glowing for a few seconds. What happened? The half-blonde growled out. The old man looked down at the floor, pulling his hat off and placing it on a table nearby. He rubbed his head and sighed again. Hey, I don't know either. Okay. I had expected this summer to just have one routine boring being repeated over and over, but one day that vest-wearing kid just suddenly started to ramble on about strange occurrences. I played it off and sent him out to do some chores in the woods, you know, hanging signs and all that to attract more tourists. I was hoping that would get the thoughts out of his head. He finished around about an hour later. I went to check up on him and walked in on the boy reading Journal 3. Stan's voice trailed off, his eyes never leaving the wooden planks under his feet. Naruto narrowed his eyes. So let me get this straight. You knew full well about what exactly hides in those woods, and the book it used to contain. Yet, despite these facts, you made him hang up signs in there, with Dipper being clueless about the dangers located in every corner. His uncle's head snapped up, rage now in his eyes. Look, you're right, I did let him go into the forest despite the dangers. But how was I supposed to know that he would find that stupid book my brother made? I only knew that it was located inside one of the trees, but I didn't even know a general location. You never told me. The brunette matched the man's glare with one of his own. And for good reason. What exactly is this good reason that you're talking about, huh? You know why I'm doing this, why having all 3 journals is important. A tear rolled down Stan's furious face. Why I'm trying so hard just to reactivate that dumb portal. The 18-year-old turned away, a frown on his face. Of course I do, you told me years ago. A snarl formed on the gray-haired businessman's face. Then why the hell are you trying so hard to stop me? Naruto didn't know what to say. Stanley began to yell louder. Why? The spiky-haired teen clenched his fists. Well. The conman's patience ran out. Just tell me. The masked teen's fury-filled cerulean eye immediately slid upwards and bore into Stan's brown ones, his fist striking the wall nearby, causing spider web cracks to appear. Because I didn't want to watch you kill yourself, you old fool. Stan froze, Naruto shutting his eyes closed. What? Sigh listen. That death machine hasn't been used in 3 decades. You'd need a heck of a lot of metal to restore it to good condition. Millions of bolts of electricity just to jump-start the thing, as well as radioactive liquid for fuel. I know that you want to get Great Uncle Ford back, but you're not as young as you once were. Your body is frailer than you'd like to confess. Besides, who knows what could happen if you open the thing up again. Stan was silent while the eldest Pine's sibling panted after his rant. He took a deep breath and glanced up at his uncle. But, while I may not be fully on board with this crazy idea of yours, I'm not against it either. I am not going to help you fix that contraption, nor am I going to sabotage it. I had known that Dipper and Mabel would take a road trip to this whack-job town, and I had only agreed with Mum and Dad to let them go because I thought that the anonymity of the journals' whereabouts would keep them safe from this monster business. I just want to protect my family. It's the only reason that I kept the locations of the other 2 journals away from you. Nothing more, nothing less. The suited male didn't say anything for a few moments, but after a while, a smile graced his face and his voice rung out. Hey, always protect your family, huh? A fond look shone in Naruto's eye. Of course, you drilled that lesson into my head. Ahem, now that you 2 are done, we have other important things to discuss. The fox, who had chosen to be silent throughout the whole ordeal, spoke up. Trying to deny the existence of the oddities those 2 see while in Gravity Falls will be the most you can do, publicly. While I would love to suggest that you can take that book from Dipper discreetly, the kid will just end up looking for it. Considering his luck in finding hidden things, I do not want that to happen as he might find out about the underground area. Sigh, you're right. My little brother's too smart and curious of a kid to just let something like this go. The teen adopted a thinking pose. Well, it has been a while since we last saw the guys in the wilderness. Me and Kurama will just have to give them all a visit and tell them to watch out for those troublesome 2. The less weirdness they see, the lesser the proof they have of everything in the journal existing. Stanley flinched and nervously chuckled as he scratched the back of his head. Actually, it's going to be harder to do that than you think. They've already made contact with a few of them. Naruto's eye twitched before he plopped down on the ground, his hand impacting against his head in a facepalm. Which ones? The gnomes. They fought against them for a reason I don't know. Though, judging from our past interactions with them, I'm pretty sure they wanted Mabel to be their queen or something. The brown-haired teen sighed. Of course, I'll talk to Jeff about that later. The other ones. They nearly made contact with your old buddy Gobble. I overheard them talking over some sort of weird picture contest in the newspaper and phoned McGucket. I had him power up that Gobblewonker robot copy you and him had made years ago and chase the kids around when they went off with Seuss. Now before you say anything, Grunkle Stan cut Naruto off before he could speak, the 18-year-old's mouth half open. I told Fiddleford to do this so that they'll really believe that the thing is real. Then, after a few chases and close calls, he'll allow them to stop him and find out that the thing was just a robot. You know, to make it seem as if Gobble doesn't exist and was just a made-up story. I had been hoping that they'd be discouraged to look for more creatures from my brother's book, but unfortunately, it didn't work. Now here's something that will catch your attention. While we were heading back to shore, she gave us a bit of a nudge from underwater. She probably thought that they were you from their scents. But if this is the reaction they'll get from Gobble, what about the other creatures of the forest? The young man raised his visible eyebrow at that. I'll definitely go out for a swim with her later, she's probably missed us quite a lot. After that, as I said earlier, we'll pay the others a visit so that we can clear up any confusions. Anyone else? Seuss found the room we locked the cursed wax figures in. You know, the one we hid behind tons of wallpaper 10 years ago. The kids battled them while I was out. When they tried to tell me about it, I made it seem as if I just brushed them off and just chalked it off as their imaginations acting up. They didn't seem to care this time though. I'm starting to worry they're going to stop trying to convince me that these odd things are real. If they do, then I don't know how to figure out what they've been up to. I see, we'll have to think up of something that will help us keep an eye on them, then. Naruto hummed in thought before a question appeared in his mind. Well, we can work on that later. But right now, I need to ask you something. What do you know of this, Gideon Gleeful? The old man's mood quickly turned sour at the mention of the name. Gideon, that brat's been on my case for ages. He's a bigger thorn in my side than his father, Bud Gleeful himself. Kid has this whole cutie act going on and has the townsfolk wrapped around his finger. The fact that you actually asked about someone in person, there's something going on with him, isn't there? Yes, he wears a weapon found only in one object. Journal 2. His bespectacled eyes widened to epic proportions. Journal 2. That little urchin's had the thing all this time. It seems so, we'll have to keep an eye on him. Especially since he's taken Mabel out on a date. He what? Naruto winced at Stan's loud voice, the man walking over to the door. Why that little? I ought to show that punk a thing or two about messing with my great. Stanley, stop. The human froze, his hand on the doorknob. We let him take Mabel for a date. The girl's been asking to go out on one many times, but we thought we'd let her go, just this once. Yes, the thought of it is still making our blood boil, but we gotta let her have some time to be all girly, although we should really be doing the opposite now that she'll be going even crazier for those of the opposite gender due to puberty. Doesn't mean we can't mess with those who wrong her though. The great uncle pulled his hand away from the handle and crossed his arms, huffing grumpily. Seconds of silence passed and he suddenly began to blink owlishly. Hang on. We've been yelling quite a lot. Don't you think that the kid outside would have heard something? Kurama shook his head and used a tail to gesture to the nail he had pressed earlier. No need for worries. I charged the privacy seal we set up years ago. He didn't hear a single thing. Naruto stood up, folding his body backwards as his spine let out multiple pops. We better get out. I promised a younger sibling of mine that I'd spend the night with him, so we'll have to stay overnight. Though, Grunkle Stan, we know that there aren't many bedrooms here. In fact, I'm pretty sure the twins have taken the attic, right? Seeing the nod of confirmation, the azure-eyed male continued on. Then I guess we'll stay at the old tree house we built. Naruto smiled melancholically. I still remember the day we built that. With the help from the gnomes, we ended up making quite a large base camp, huh? Hey, yeah, since you're staying there, you're going to need these to get in. Stan pulled out a loose floorboard and picked up a shiny object from the hidden cubbyhole. It was a set of keys. He smirked at the glinting metal before chucking it at his oldest great nephew. The strangely dressed enigma let out a squawk of surprise as he hastily juggled the key from hand to hand when it was about to fall. Stay safe when you're out there, yeah. Naruto merely gave him a smirk. Hey, it's me. When have I never played it safe? You mean not counting every single situation you've ever been in? Never. The snickering fox was ignored, his partner's smirk not leaving his face. Besides, if anyone in our family has to make sure everything is safe, it's you. You're the one who has to deal with children riding on horses crashing through your wall. Which, by the way, I'll fix tomorrow before I move into the treehouse. Yeah, thanks brat. Just go out there and play with the boy already. With Dipper. They sure have been in there for quite a while now. I wonder what they're talking about. Dipper thought to himself out loud, pausing his fight against the console-controlled character on the TV screen. He turned and stared at the door, thinking whether or not he should go and try to listen in before shaking his head out of his thoughts. He restarted the game and began to push the buttons on his controller. Who am I kidding? If it's really important, they'd probably tell me and Mabel. The sound of heavy footsteps making their way towards his direction caught his attention. He glanced briefly away from the screen and saw a flash of Naruto and Kurama making their way over to him. Hey, buddy, I'm back, as promised. Naruto sat down on the floor, letting out a groan when his spine ached slightly. He blinked when he spotted the familiar rectangular device hooked up to the TV along with the familiar fedora-wearing platypus fighting what seemed to be a triangle-headed pharmacist. Cookies to those who know where these two come from. Both were, oddly enough, wearing gladiator armor, which looked odd for the human, as his armor was worn over a white coat. Good old Caesar's warriors. Nice choice. You know this game? The vest-wearing boy asked, turning away from the screen. Before Naruto could respond, an 8-bit sound played while the platypus lay flat on the concrete, swirls representing his eyes and the words, "Game over," appeared in bold text. The boy had lost the fight. Dipper's eye twitched in irritation and he barely restrained his urge to throw the controller through the window in his current fit of rage. Dang it, this game is impossible. Naruto smirked and took the remote from his brother's hands, selecting the "try again" option. Once the round started, Dipper could only gape in awe as Naruto completely obliterated the odd pharmacist man. His eyes slid to controller, his chocolate-colored pupils widening at the sight of his quick, precise, yet nonchalant pushing of buttons. Naruto raised his eyebrow at his expression and chuckled. Hey, don't sweat it, kiddo. You've only had a couple of hours experience in this game, while I had been playing on this thing since age 4 through 8. To be honest, I'm surprised that my old gaming console is still functioning. Dipper paused and gave Naruto a confused look. Wait, what do you mean by, my old gaming console? This used to be yours. His brother let out a bark of laughter. Well, yeah, why else would a big grump like our grunkle get one in the first place? Hey, I spent my summer here for 4 years in a row. Me and Grunkle Stan would always muck around and would mess with the other townsfolk. In fact, I found K during a summer I spent here. The trips to this place were always the highlight of my years. Coming back here after so long, it's quite a nostalgic experience for me, actually. Dipper sat in silence, lost in thought as he contemplated on this new piece of information about his enigmatic sibling. I didn't know that he used to stay here. Also, didn't Mom and Dad say that he had gotten that claw scar he always hides when he was 5? Does that mean he's seen some of the strange stuff as well? If he did, he may have forgotten already. He did say, age 4 through 8, meaning the last time he came here was, wait a minute. The young sleuth perked up and faced his brother. But you said earlier that you stopped playing on this thing when you were 8. Since you're 18 now, that would make it 10 years since you've last been here. Yep, why you asking? Well, it's just that, From the way you spoke about Gravity Falls, it seemed that you really enjoyed being here. How come you stopped visiting? Naruto unconsciously tensed, a detail that his little brother did not miss. He also did not fail to notice the quick flash of guilt that had appeared in the older boy's eye. Dipper looked at him even closer, half curious and half suspicious at the same time. Is something wrong? Naruto shook his head to clear it and gave Dipper the most convincing eye smile he could manage at the moment. Ah, nothing. Everything's fine. The reason I stopped coming back is because 1. Our parents thought that this place was a bit too dangerous for me to stay in back then, since apparently I have a knack for getting into trouble. The two heard Kurama snort in amusement. They turned to the fox and saw that he had an eyebrow raised with a look that clearly said, "That's an understatement," the odd sight making Dipper snicker while Naruto's eye twitched. Ignoring that know-it-all fox, let's continue. At hearing his voice, Dipper looked back to his brother, not noticing that he had thrown a harmless blue flame in the fox's face when his attention was taken off of him. 2. There was a situation years ago that prevented me from coming back, something about people noticing that either they and a couple of others were missing parts of their memory, though we just threw it off as superstition. Then last but not least, reason number 3 was because 2 certain siblings of mine began to hound our parents about coming here to Gravity Falls, and because of the things that had happened during my stays here, Mum and Dad refused. With those 3 things, I just chose to stop coming here altogether. But you were right though, I did enjoy the times that I spent here. Oh, the younger teen was silent, staring at his feet as he thought. He was feeling a bit guilty now. From the looks of things, he and Mabel were one of the major reasons why he couldn't come back. Although N was a walking trouble magnet, it just seemed to pale in comparison to the other 2 reasons, more so because their parents had only called him Trouble Magnet as a joke. Though, other than his and his sister's involvement in their brother's cancellation of trips to Gravity Falls, the second reason caught his eye. Mysterious memory lapses. What had happened 10 years ago that could have caused that? Big bro, I know that you guys just think that the memory stuff is just some sort of lie or something, but do you think you can tell me of any rumors you can remember hearing about it from 10 years ago? TCH. Great job, Naruto. Now the kid's curious. Asterisk sigh in hindsight, I should not have said anything but the first and third reasons. HN. Naruto adopted a fake thinking pose, putting a finger to his chin, humming. Sorry kiddo, I myself can't really remember what had happened all those years ago. To be honest, the only thing I can remember is the missing memory thing. Alright, thanks. Although calm silence then filled the area, the minds of those in the room were anything but calm as many thoughts flew in their heads. Time skip. A few hours later, Mabel trudged up to the doorstep of her uncle's tourist trap, a sad look on her face while a live lobster was in her hands. She peered in through the window and checked the time. It was 8:20 p.m. It seems that as thrilled as Gideon was at being able to take her out, he had taken her brother's warning quite seriously. She knocked on the door quietly, her arms currently feeling as if concrete had encased them. Light shone out of the house, Mabel wincing when her vision was filled with pure, shining white. She smiled slightly at the sight of K, giving him a pat on the nose as she walked over to her great-uncle's fish tank, dropping the lobster inside. Her older brother was sat on the floor by their grunkle's chair, the TV remote in hand while her younger twin was laid on his back on the seat. N stopped his channel surfing and Dipper paused his reading when they heard their sister sigh loudly. They shared a worried look, Dipper placing his book down, studying his sister's behavior closely. So, how did it go? He asked tentatively. The girl didn't turn to face her brothers, opting instead to stare at the snapping lobster in the water tank. She let out a forlorn sigh and replied as she pressed a finger against the tank's glass. I don't know, she said, her voice clearly displaying her confusion on the matter. But we have a pet lobster now. Naruto's eye narrowed slightly, a suspicion appearing in his mind. At least this will be the last time you'll have to deal with that Gideon guy, right? Only one date. That was the deal. It's all over, right, Mabel? I don't know, she screamed, her arms flashing to her head, pulling at her brown hair. He asked me out again after this one, and I couldn't say no. There were just so many people watching, I didn't know how to say no. Like this, Mabel. No, the youngest sibling twisted his body and sat up properly on the armchair, his thin arms crossed over his chest. That is unless, please tell me you don't actually like that guy, do you? Mabel moaned in irritation when she saw Dipper give her an accusing stare before groaning again when she noticed N and K doing the same thing. Okay. 1. It's not that easy. 2. Yes, I do like Gideon. But before you jump to conclusions, I don't like him in that way. As a close friend or sister. Yes. Romantically. No. She sighed and ran a hand through her hair. I only accepted his offer because I didn't want to hurt his feelings. Right now, I'm only focusing on how to get the relationship between us back to how it was, as friends. The trio's gazes softened. They knew she was telling the truth. Naruto stood up and walked over to Mabel, ruffling her hair with a hand. Hey, don't sweat it, kiddo. You're a Pines. I know you'll be able to do it. The only female Pines sibling smiled and hugged her older brother. Yeah, thanks big bro. Hey, no problem. He then lifted his head up and stared at the door. Now that you're back, I'm just wondering where Grunkle Stan went off to. The next night, at the mystery shack, Naruto sighed and wiped his brow of sweat, taking a step back to marvel at his finished work, twirling the hammer in his hand. The sun had set and the moon was high up in the black sky now. His eyes moved to the left, a smirk forming under his mask at the sight of his little brother smiling. They had spent the entire day fixing up the mess Gideon had created last night, and after multiple trips from the shack to the town and back again for supplies, they finally finished. The young boy had gotten a splinter or two, as well as some gashes here and there, but those were taken care of easily. They both rolled their necks, letting out hisses of pain. Clanking sounds reached Naruto's ears and he raised an eyebrow when he saw Dipper placing all the tools back into the toolbox they had borrowed from Seuss. Kurama shook himself as he awoke from his nap and blinked when he saw the fixed wall. His eyes trailed downwards and spotted an odd plank. Hey Kit, the plank second from the right is missing a nail in the bottom. Damn it. Hey Dip, pass me a nail, would ya? Naruto asked, his eyes not leaving the problematic plank. He saw movement to his right and held out a hand, nodding when he felt a nail drop onto it. He lined it up to the dot he had drawn on the plank earlier and began to hammer the metal object in. Thanks lil bro. So, how do you think Mabel is holding up right about now? Well Dipper was cut off when his twin raced past them and barged into the living room, slamming the door shut. The three turned to each other confusedly before following the girl into the house, Dipper taking the toolbox with him. They were greeted with the sight of Mabel pacing in a panicked manner. He's so nice but I have to end this. I don't want to break his heart though. She let out an angry shout, gripping her hair tightly. How am I supposed to get out of this? Naruto took a cautious step towards his sister. Sis, you alright? Mabel whirled around to face him, a crazed look in her eye. No. Her brothers and Pet flinched, the elder one holding an arm out to stop her twin from going forwards. Not taking his eyes off of her, he muttered lowly to the birthmarked boy. No sudden movements. She is in a Pines rage mode right now, we need to be careful. The two sides stared at one another, the boys frozen in place while the lone girl glared at them, her eye twitching occasionally in what seemed to be insanity. The stare down lasted for a few minutes before Mabel finally sighed and calmed herself, the three males silently letting out breaths of relief. I'm sorry for snapping at you, guys. It's just that my plan is going downhill. She moaned, sitting down on the floor, staring at the ground. I don't know what happened. First, we were just chatting, staying safely in the friend zone. Then, all of a sudden, he just pulls me in a pit of quicksand located in the romance zone. Mabel pulled her knees up to her chin and wrapped her arms around her legs, burying her face into her thighs as she let out a wail of confusion and irritation. The spiky-haired Pines sighed and placed a hand on his distraught sister's head. Hey, it's all right. Think of it this way, at least you won't have to marry the idiot, eh? Mabel hesitantly raised her head, the expression on her face slowly becoming happy. Yeah, hey, I mean, why would I even marry that guy? That's completely bonkers. At this moment, Stan barged into the room wearing a shirt that had the words, Team Gideon, printed on it. He stood up straight, the look on his face practically saying that, I did something good. Naruto and Kurama turned to the man suspiciously. Dipper hopped down from the armchair and pointed at the man's torso. "Grunkle Stan, where have you been? And what's with the shirt?" The man ignored him, his attention focusing on Mabel. "Ha ha, good news, kiddo, you're going to have to marry Gideon." The other four in the room gave him incredulous looks. "What?" the long-haired girl yelled out. "What the heck did you do, Stan?" her twin asked, glaring at their great uncle. "Bad timing, very bad timing," Naruto said under his breath, facepalming with Kurama following his example using a tail. Stan raised an eyebrow at their reactions and pulled his hands out in front of him in a defensive manner. Hey, hear me out, yeah, I've got this whole thing figured out with Bud Gleeful. Not only did I get this awesome shirt, Stan pulled on the hem of his shirt, stretching it out slightly for emphasis. He smirked when he didn't see a sphere for a stomach, happy that he had been doing the same exercises he used to do with his oldest great-nephew for the past 10 years, but I also got a good deal out of it all. If everything goes as we planned, then there's a buttload of cash just waiting for collection. The fox and his partner shook their heads in exasperation while Mabel ran up the stairs leading to the attic, screaming loudly as she did so. Naruto rubbed his eyelids and pointed to the stairs. "Dipper, go check on Mabel. I'm going to have a chat with our uncle." "Got it." Dipper nodded before briskly sprinting up the stairs. When he heard Dipper open the door to the twins' room, Naruto opened his eyes and stared at the sheepish Stan. "So this is why you were gone for random periods of time, huh?" The old man could only scratch the back of his head, attempting to make an innocent look on his face. "Do you realize just how much you messed up my little sister?" Yes." A few tick marks appeared on Naruto's head. "You know, you're going to have to make it up to her because of this whole stunt you just pulled." "What? You heard me loud and clear. Why do I have to?" Grunkle Stan paused mid-sentence when he heard Dipper's footsteps as he walked into the room. "Well, that was quick, brat. How's the girl doing?" Dipper sighed. "Unfortunately, she's in Sweater Town at the moment. She's calmed down somewhat, but that's only after I promised that I'd talk to Gideon for her about this whole ordeal later." The azure-eyed young man turned back to Grunkle Stan. "You actually caused her to go to Sweater Town. You're definitely going to have to make it up to her." The next day, deep in the forest, with Naruto and Kurama, the Crimson Kitsune's long ears twitched as they listened in for any signs of wild animals while his human counterpart slashed through the vines and foliage that blocked their path using the blade-shaped, blue energy surrounding his hand. Kurama was glad that the sword glowed in the dark as the sun had already set a while ago. He had no qualms with darkness, but he would rather not slam into every low-hanging branch due to the decreased quality of his eyesight. The path seemed to not have been used in a long while, as they had expected. So far, all the fox had been hearing was the crunching of leaves and twigs at every step they took, the swooshing of the blade, the chirping of insects, as well as the jingling of the keys Naruto held in his free hand. "How long until we're there, again?" he asked tiredly. Since the masked male was busy cutting down obstructions, the quadruped had been given the task of carrying his luggage for him. The duo had been walking for around about an hour now, and the extra weight on his back was beginning to get to him. Naruto sighed exasperatedly. "Just wait, you grouchy canine. The path has not been tended to. This situation was expected to happen in time. Don't worry, since we're cutting these annoyances now, later trips will be much quicker than this." He twisted his head to the side and glanced at the fox behind him. "So stop being a crybaby." The scarlet animal scoffed. "Tch, you would be complaining too if you had to carry your own heavy gear instead of dumping it all on me." "I doubt it. Wait." Naruto came to a sudden halt, and began to sniff the air. "Do you smell that?" Kurama paused a while and titled his head in curiosity before doing the same thing. His eyes widened when a familiar scent reached his nose and a smile spread across both his and Naruto's face. "Yes, I do." Naruto looked up into the sky and seemed to ask a question to no one in particular. "You can come out, we know you two are there." The bushes rustled and two shadowy figures walked out, their features still obscured by the darkness as they were not close enough to be affected by the Naruto's glowing hand. Their smiles grew wider when a familiar voice spoke up. "So, the others were telling the truth. You two really are back." The tattooed male let out a chuckle. Yes, we are. How've you been, Jeff, Shmeebalock? Said little men walked forward, their appearances now fully visible in the light. Both of the short creatures wore a light blue, long-sleeved shirt with dark blue pants along with dark brown boots and had small, red, pointed hats atop their heads. But while Jeff had a clean brown beard, Shmeebalock had an uncontrolled and bushy, dark gray beard as well as a mustache that covered his mouth. His nose was also quite crooked when compared to Jeff's and he had 2 teeth protruding from his lips. We and the others have been doing fine, kid. The question is, are you all right? Considering what caused you to leave in the first place, Jeff trailed off at the end, wincing when the memory popped up in his mind. Naruto stayed silent for a while before letting out a breath. Yeah, I'm fine. So, how's everyone in Gravity Falls? Safer than when I stayed, I hope. Shmeebalock, Shmeebalock. The strange gnome nodded. The team gave him a nod in return, the gnome's odd dialect translating to, yeah, they're fine. That's good to hear, he replied, sending a guilty gaze to the ground. Jeff and the others saw this, the younger-looking gnome climbing up to the boy's shoulder. Hey, don't sweat it, kid. Those guys have been doing their business for years now, they started a long while before you came around. Back then, you were just a kid. At that time, they were stronger and just a bit smarter. No need to get all down in the dumps about what happened, like, a decade ago. Just learn from what happened and use it to your advantage. Yeah, I know that. But while they have already been fiddling with the minds of the townsfolk for years before my arrival, I'm pretty sure they weren't as aggressive during their usual erasing of memories before I came. Now usually there is a chance that people's memories will come back if something is used as a catalyst to jumpstart the suppressed memory, such as if McGucket were to watch the memories he deleted, he would most likely regain his sanity, but in her case, I'm not so sure. Jeff sighed and patted the saddened pine on the shoulder. Kid, A loud crash and twin yells of terror from above caused them to flinch. Naruto grabbed Jeff and Shmeebalock as he and Kurama hopped up into the trees. The duo's breaths got caught in their throats when they saw that Dipper and the Gideon child were the ones falling and were about to hit the ground. Just as they were going to jump out and catch them, they dropping children glowed blue and screeched into a halt just before they became human pancakes. They were twisted into an upright position and Mabel slowly floated down, the amulet the white-haired boy had been wearing earlier clutched in her hand. She glared at the shorter child. Listen, Gideon, I will never, ever, date you. Just leave me and my family alone. Dipper let out an oof as he was dropped onto the ground before quickly standing back up and pointing a triumphant finger at Gideon. Yeah. Mabel then promptly dropped the necklace she had been holding and stomped on it, effectively breaking the powerful gem. Gideon gasped in shock. My powers. The boy ran and kneeled down by the broken shards. He was silent for a few moments before he hopped onto his feet and gave the twins a hate-filled look. He began to walk backwards, his eyes not leaving the siblings. This isn't over. This is not the last time you'll see of Whittle, me. Mabel and Dipper sighed when he left their peripheral vision and high-fived each other. The female twin spoke. Man, he really was a psycho after all, huh? Yep, I told you, never trust someone whose hair is bigger than their own head. Now come on, we gotta get back to the shack. Dipper wrapped an arm around his sister's shoulders with her doing the same for him, the two laughing and joking as they walked off. When their laughter could no longer be heard, the hidden quartet jumped down from their hiding spot. Jeff grinned and smacked Shmeebalock in the back happily. See, I told you she was a good choice for a queen. If only it weren't for that other brat with her, we would have gotten her. Shmeebalock. The other gnome nodded eagerly in agreement. Naruto and Kurama gave them deadpan stares. You guys do realize you're talking about my younger siblings, right? Naruto asked, arching an eyebrow at the two. The gnomes froze. Jeff chuckled nervously while Shmeebalock stood behind him, hoping to get the least amount of bodily harm as possible. Does that mean that you guys have heard about the scuffle we were in against them? Seeing that the teen's expression now showed curiosity and confusion, he elaborated. You know, the whole kidnapping your sister thing. That. Naruto nodded in understanding. Of course we do. After all, You guys fought at the Mystery Shack, during my great-uncle's work hours. You should have been more discreet. The townsfolk might have seen you. You were lucky though. When he saw you guys, he immediately distracted the people he had been entertaining. Jeff then timidly looked down at his feet as he shuffled them. So, by any chance, can we please take Mabel as our queen? Naruto stared at Kurama as he checked that he had secured everything on his back using chakra during their hasty jump into the trees and sighed. No, Jeff, so far, we've only let her out on a date once, and that took a lot of holding back on the bloodlust meter. Now you're asking us to let her marry your entire species. Nope. It doesn't help that the guy who we let her go out on a first date with was that short psycho kid we just saw. With how his personality actually was, it doesn't help our outlooks on Mabel dating guys. Kurama glanced at them from the corner of his eye as he laid down, sprawled on the ground. Just be happy we aren't going to do anything to you for the stunt you pulled on them. Jeff and Shmeebelok flinched, the latter speaking up. Shmeebelok, 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 Shmeebelok. The short creature waved his arms rapidly with Jeff nodding in agreement, the translation of his words being, "We're sorry, boss. We didn't know. We'll do anything to make it up to you guys." Make it up to us, eh? Naruto said absent-mindedly, staring at where his siblings had disappeared off to. Well, now that I think about it, there is something I need you guys to do. A bead of sweat trailed down his forehead. He felt the hair under his blue and white hat slowly become damp. His chocolate eyes were narrowed as he stared at the test of mental capacity in front of him, his lips pursed in contemplation and his fingers steepled underneath his chin. The thoughts swirling in his mind went a mile a minute before everything came to a complete halt. He let out a breath, his crossed legs tensed on the wooden floor as he raised a shaking arm in order to reach one of the plastic pieces standing vigil on a checkered board. He tentatively lifted it up, sliding it to his right in order to situate it one square away from its previous position. His face scrunched up, his fingers hesitantly placing it on the flat box. His eyes then flickered up to his opponent's face, scrutinizing his intrigued expression. He flinched when the other male's eye curved upwards, knowing that this meant he was smiling. The cerulean-eyed competitor confidently moved one of his own pieces a few squares upwards, his head tilting up slightly as he stared at his shorter foe. Checkmate. Dipper let out a growl of frustration, his eyes twitching while his hands clutched the sides of his hat as he pulled them down in anger. He buried his face in his hands, thinking about how he could have been outsmarted while his body leaned back against the sleeping Kurama behind him. Naruto chuckled at his younger siblings' reaction along with Mabel, Seuss, and Wendy. The older teen moved forward, reaching over to ruffle the short boy's hair through his hat. Don't sweat it, lil bro. You caught me by surprise a couple of times this round. If you keep practicing, I've got no doubt that you'll be able to whoop my butt in chess later on in time. Naruto smirked underneath his mask, proud at how fast his little brother's intellect was growing. Ow, oi, what was that for? As he was about to say more, he felt someone give his elongated hair a short but harsh tug. He twisted his head slightly and glanced back at his sister, raising an eyebrow at the concentrated look she held as she fiddled with his untied and untamed hair. Not looking away from her brushing, she absent-mindedly gave him a reply. Your hair is hard enough to manage as it is. Stop squirming or I'll mess something up. Naruto huffed and looked away childishly, causing Mabel to giggle. She had known Naruto long enough to realize that he was pouting underneath his mask. Putting the hairbrush down on the ground, she nabbed the hair tie laying on the floor beside her and began to tie the male's hair into a ponytail. Pushing the knot up to tighten it, she nodded in approval before standing up from her kneeling position. All right, all done. The spiky-haired teen grunted as he stood up, his younger brother following his actions. He picked up his own orange cap and ran a hand through his now half-blonde and half-brown hair, smiling under his mask. He pulled his hat onto his head and patted his sister on the head gratefully. Thank you, Mabel. The trio of siblings blinked when they heard a feminine giggle come from the checkout station. Turning to the redhead leaning against the wooden desk, he raised an eyebrow questioningly. Feeling that she was being watched, Wendy looked up from her reading and looked around. When she saw the look he sent her, she gave him a cheeky grin. What? Naruto rolled his eyes and elaborated. What were you laughing about? Oh, nothing, The female corduroy gave him a sideways smirk. Most of the guys I know would rather jump into the mystery shack's bottomless pit before doing something that someone our age would consider at least a little bit girly. Yet, here you are, letting your baby sister tie your hair up as if you two were in the middle of a slumber party. He tilted his head to the side, slightly confused. So, I happen to like doing activities with my younger siblings, even if whatever we may be doing is what other males consider girly. I hope that it isn't a problem. Nah, it's not a problem. She set the magazine she was reading down and crossed her arms, sending him an amused smile. In fact, my respect for you has actually kinda grown. Out of all the teenagers I know, only very few tolerate the younger kids in their family. But to actually interact with them, to be honest, I dunno why they automatically steer away from them. I mean, I get that they can be a bit annoying at times, no offense Dipper and Mabel, but come on. They're just kids, ya know. Naruto's eye curved up once more as he smiled in agreement, kneeling down in order to hug his smiling siblings by the shoulders. Preach. A tug on his hoodie and the sound of his sister's voice caught the male teen's attention. Dipper and I were going to go and play mini golf in our room. I was wondering if you wanted to play with us. Naruto glanced sadly down at his siblings' hopeful looks and let out a sigh. Sorry kiddo, but I was planning on going out to town today so that I can go get a job. Grunkle Stan may have won, but he can barely make enough to sustain himself, let alone two other people. He chuckled but quickly stopped when he saw their still downtrodden expressions. He sighed again. I'm sorry guys, I really am. I'll see you later, alright. Alright, see ya, bro. He smiled and messed their hair before turning to the shop's handyman. Oh, and Seuss, can you come over here for a minute? The sweeping man raised an eyebrow and placed the broom he was holding against the wall nearby. Once he was in front of him, En leaned forward and whispered into his ear. Can you do me a favor? Grunkle Stan says that you've seen her sneak off to our old hangout before. Can you make sure not to let her get up there? I have some things on that platform that I need to hide, you know, in case they suddenly trigger something now that I'm here. The Caucasian Hispanic male nodded in understanding and gave him a salute. Got it, dude. Naruto smirked as the man-child went back to sweeping and whistled sharply to Kurama, ignoring the other's curious stares. The fox immediately perked up, his scarlet eyes quickly finding him. The mysterious Pines used his head to gesture to the outside before making his way out the door with its bell signaling his exit, Kurama following closely after him. Wendy's eyes narrowed in suspicion, emerald irises following her fellow teen's face as he hopped into his car. They then slid upwards, focusing on the hair that poked out of the bottom of his hat. Was it just her, or did his hair color change? Before she could think more of the subject, her head pulsed, the slight pain it brought her making her freeze. As this happened, certain 22-year-old paused his chore, his eyes filling with worry when he saw her flinch. She became dazed as the sight of her surroundings were replaced by the fuzzy image of a grinning golden-haired child, his face too blurry to be recognized. But as quickly as the vision came, it dissipated and she was once again back in the real world. Ow. Not again. Why does this always happen? Sigh. Okay Wendy, just clear your mind and it'll be fine. It's how you've dealt with this for the past couple of years. Try to think back to earlier. Oh, right. What was that whispering about? She thought, her curiosity on the subject of her boss's eldest great-nephew growing. She clicked her tongue as she watched his orange truck drive into the forest road, her eyes catching the brief flash of a tail as it ducked away from sight. I wonder what he's up to, maybe the twins know. Turning to the duo, she was about to ask the question when she spotted their dejected faces and cast a small, sympathetic smile. From the ramblings she'd been subjected to before the enigmatic teen's arrival, she could tell that the three siblings were very close. Not being able to spend time with their brother as much as they're used to must be taking a toll on them, just like if her younger brothers were to be denied from spending time with their father. A couple of pennies for a pair of twins, thoughts. Her voice snapped them out of their daze, their heads snapping to her in surprise. They voiced out in sync. Hey, it's pretty obvious something's bothering you guys, and I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that it has something to do with your older brother N. She walked around the desk's corner and sat on the counter, giving the smaller two a knowing smirk. Now come on, tell me what's wrong. They shared a glance and each rubbed an arm nervously. Hooking a foot behind a leg slightly, Dipper spoke first. Well, it's just that he hasn't really been spending much time with us lately, which is odd since the three of us would be, according to our parents, near inseparable during the summer. He raised a hand up to his chin and gained a thoughtful look while Mabel nodded and placed a hand on his shoulder. Yeah, he's acting kinda different from when we have summers back in Piedmont. Wendy blinked silently, her eyes curious. Different, how so? Well, he'd normally be pretty laid back, and would spend every day with us pranking others and generally just messing around, Dipper said, his head down as he stared at the wooden floorboards in thought, a finger still on his chin. But although he's still spent time with us the past week we've been here, he's more serious than normal. Yeah, his twin added, nodding. He's more secretive too. Like, Grunkle Stan told us he'd be living outside the mystery shack for the summer, and whenever we asked him where he would be staying, he doesn't say anything and just changes the subject. The redhead leaned back slightly, placing a hand on either side of her for balance. Huh, I guess that is pretty weird. Who knows what's going through that guy's head right now? I know, right, she started, walking over to Wendy. She jumped up and, with slight difficulty, managed to take a seat beside the taller girl. I mean, why is it so hard to understand guys? You can never tell if they'll end up either being some sort of a gnome or a creepy psycho instead of the unknown vigilante that you secretly hope for. The corduroy raised an eyebrow at the girl. Thinking about that Gideon kid again. Yeah. Mabel let out a tired breath before laying back on the counter, her legs hanging off the side. Hey, Wendy, you've had boyfriends before, right? Dipper groaned. Well, this conversation quickly took a turn for the strange. The freckled teen laughed into a hand at the boy before turning back to Mabel. Yeah, quite a lot actually. Why? How do you know if you should be with them or not? Wendy's eyebrows shot up to her hairline in surprise and she looked at the girl dubiously. What? I don't know anymore. I mean, that's been flying around my head for a while now, and I thought you'd know the answer. Okay, but why me? I thought that this would be a question you'd ask Ken or something. Well, even though he was quite popular back in Piedmont, he didn't really want to be a part of stuff like this. If a girl asked him out, he'd just sorta scratch his head sheepishly and try to say no in a polite manner. Mabel lifted her head up and banged it back on the desk lightly. You have more experience with this sort of thing than me. I mean, come on, I haven't even had my first kiss yet. First kiss, Wendy repeated absent-mindedly. Huh, I forgot that was supposed to be a big thing. To be honest, I can't remember who I had that with, but my mom always said she knew. Mabel gasped and sat up straight, staring into Wendy's eyes with a starry-eyed look. Did she tell you who? Dipper moaned as he smacked his face with his palm. His twin always was a sucker for things like this. He, unfortunately for his current situation, was not. I'm outta here. The female brunette rolled her eyes at her sibling and focused on Wendy, her curiosity overriding her slight annoyance. The other girl merely chuckled at Dipper as he walked over to help Sue sweep the shop. Well, she said it happened 10 years ago, back when I was still 8. I can't really remember much from that time or anything from before then. Even my mom herself said that couldn't recall much about the guy. Now that got Dipper's attention. He froze mid-step, his eyes widening at the seemingly useless tidbit of information. 10 years and lack of memories. Seemed awfully familiar to him. But she told me that she could remember a basic description at least. She said that I had been pretty close with a boy with untamed blonde hair and shining crystalline eyes my age. He'd come and go from Gravity Falls, only staying for a little while. Apparently, it happened by accident. We were running from a pet that he had with him, laughing our heads off. As we ran past the old Dusk to Dawn shop, we turned around to see how far away we were but accidentally tripped over our own feet, landing on the cracked pavement with our lips locked. Then she laughed and talked about adorable our flustered faces looked whenever we were together after that, saying that at least we didn't go off somewhere to cause trouble for a while. Mabel looked up at Wendy with an amazed gaze. Ah, you guys sounded so cute. Hey, I figured you would say something like that. she said with a slight knowing tone as she sent a half-smirk down at the girl. Mabel's currently star-shaped pupils shone as she shook like a child on a sugar high in her excitement. Where is he now? Did you guys ever get together? I don't know where he is, neither do my folks. He just stopped coming to Gravity Falls one day. They said that the last time we saw him was when he'd gotten on a bus to leave for his parents, and we've never seen him since. Even though I've forgotten most of the stuff I knew about him, I kinda wanna meet him. Ya know, outta curiosity. Oh, what if it all turns out to be some sort of twisty, romantic love story? I can just see it now. After years of being apart, the two destined ones finally meet again in an unexpected manner. Wendy's smirk grew, her amusement growing as the younger female kept going on and on about possibilities. Seeing the girl still carrying the naivety and innocence that most children the sweater lover's age had made the teen happy. It kind of reminded her of how she used to be, but, you know, kind of. She tried to stifle her giggles, but at times, she couldn't help but let out a laugh at a few of her ideas. Seriously, an enigmatic hero who carries the burdens and memories of a past life. How believable is that? While his twin gushed over the story, Dipper's thoughts were on something different. Hey, Wendy, what was that about not really being able to remember things again? She shot him a confused stare. Dipper scratched his head sheepishly, similarly to his older brother. You said something about not being able to remember. Oh, yeah, I can pretty much remember what happened during the year I turned 9 until now, but most of the stuff from the year I turned 8 and before is all but a hazy blur. By any chance, do you remember any rumors that may have been circling about the town, regarding the memories situation? No, why do you ask? She tilted her head slightly, her eyes trying not to look at the still fangirling Mabel. Nothing, just curious. The redhead raised an eyebrow at the boy before shrugging. Oh, well, it isn't any of my business. Besides, he's probably just thinking about something he's seen in that weird book I saw him read from time to time. She was going to speak again when the sound of the door's bell jingling cut her off and prevented any words from escaping her lips. Hey, brats, I'm gonna go into town. I remember that I still owed Mabel something 'cause of that marriage stunt, so, you two want anything? Stan grunted, looking at his great niece and great nephew. The twins shared a grin and yelled out one word. Chocolate. Their great uncle rolled his eyes. Noted. Now Wendy, Seuss, I need you two to clean the bathrooms. Got it. Both of them stood up straight and gave a salute. Got it, Mr. Pines. Seuss smiled widely. Absolutely not, boss. Wendy smirked cheekily. Ha ha. Stay out of trouble at least, all right. And with that, the old man left. Wendy waited until he had driven off at a considerable distance away from the shack before tapping the Pines twins on the shoulders as she walked over to a not so subtly put curtain. Oh, what's this? She asked them over dramatically. With one pull, the curtain moved to the side, revealing a ladder. Gasp. It's a secret ladder. Seuss flinched, Naruto's earlier words reappearing in his mind. Dudes, I don't think you should go up there. Don't think Mr. Pines would like that. Hey, what's Stan gonna do about it? He's not here right now, is he? Wendy shrugged. I wasn't exactly talking about Stan. Seuss turned to the two children. I'll rephrase. I don't think N would like you two doing something dangerous like going up there. The two gained puzzled expressions. Why? What's up there? Seuss shuffled his feet anxiously. Well, the ladder leads up to the roof of the shack, that's why he says it's dangerous. The eldest corduroy child interjected, a foot already on the ladder. You guys gonna come up here or not? The duo turned to each other and shrugged, large grins stretching on their faces as they began to follow Wendy up the ladder. Seuss stared up at them nervously, his hands clutching his broom a bit tighter. He had seen her freeze earlier and knew that she was beginning to recall more and more of the past, a fact that made him very concerned. The redhead had frozen during work many times before, and with the increase in the occurrences rate, he feared that soon. Seuss shook his head. He could only hope that not only would N forgive the fact that he couldn't stop them, but also that Wendy wouldn't get another memory flash because of his inability to do so. To be continued. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.